Hi everyone, I'm Denise Rose of the Happy Vegan Couple. If you ever never seen me before, let me just take a few moments to tell you what I've been doing in the whole food plant-based community. If you found this interview, you found our YouTube channel. Along with my husband Georgie, we created the Happy Vegan Couple YouTube channel, and we're also on Facebook. But on YouTube, I encourage you to check out what we have there because Georgie is a great cook. And what we've done is we've created a bunch of whole food plant-based cooking videos of the kind of food we eat in our house, which is very healthy. It's either very minimal oil, added sugar, salt, or none of that extra. So you don't get a lot of those processed ingredients with our cooking videos. The other thing I just want to tell you about it is that Georgie actually shows you step-by-step instructions on how to cook. So we're trying to appeal to people who maybe aren't really cooks themselves, or now that they're transitioning from an animal-based processed food diet to one of more plants, they might be like, what do I do and how do I do this? And so we take the time in our cooking videos to really show you step-by-step instructions. We also teach in Tucson, Arizona, where we live. And now I'm doing that virtually with Zoom, and I've actually created a 12-week course, 24 hours of plant-based knowledge on the science of whole food plant-based nutrition and on all the great practices and tips to eat healthy whole food plant-based. So if anybody's looking for a course, you know, I love to teach, and you can always contact me. Maybe we can set something up. And then finally, I've been doing interviews like the ones you're going to hear today. I always love to interview people about their lives and their stories. And I decided, you know, let's talk to more and more people who have actually transitioned from eating a standard American diet to one of whole plant foods and hear about the benefits they received and the steps they took and even the challenges they had while they made that transition so that we can help inspire more people to optimize their health with whole food plant-based eating. So that's really the catalyst about why I started doing these interviews. So today, I'm so excited to share with you the story of Jeff, a guy around 50 years old who lives in Michigan. Well, about 4 to 5 years ago, Jeff started changing the way he ate, and he transitioned to a whole food plant-based diet. Prior to his change, Jeff weighed in at 348 pounds. Yes, you heard that, 348 pounds. And he was taking, would you believe, 21 pills a day of ibuprofen to help him with the pain and inflammation in his body. So a health crisis propelled Jeff to reflect on what he was eating and what was causing him so much pain and that excess weight he put on and all the serious health issues that he was dealing with just in his middle-aged years. So he did the research, he found the resources he needed, and he started eating in a completely different way than before. And so in our interview today, we're going to hear all about Jeff's amazing story of transformation, the steps he took to become a very healthy man instead of one with multiple diseases brewing in his body. So before I actually bring him on to talk, I'm just going to show you his little before and after pictures because they are extraordinary. So let me just show you what those are. Bring up my slides here. And I just move myself out of the way. And look at that. There's Jeff on the left when he was a different person, 348 pounds. He actually owned a barbecue restaurant. And that's what, you know, he was doing there, creating that food. The food that he now recognized later was causing all his disease and illness and all that weight. And now you see him on the right, a completely different person. I mean, with this healthy, lean body and, you know, a face of confidence and happiness that he knows now his life is going to be totally different. Let me just show you one other set of pictures that we have of him. You know, you can just see in the face, you know, the huge difference of what happens when you're eating unhealthy as opposed to healthy. So I am so excited to bring Jeff on and to listen to his story and help inspire everybody else. So I'm going to unmute him now, and we'll see if we can get him on. Let me unmute him. Let's see.
Hi,
Okay,
Denise.
there he is, Jeff. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start out with, you know, you made this wonderful transformation, but there's a backstory. And I want to hear a little bit about that backstory. So before you know, became this new whole food plant-based eater and this completely new body and mindset, you know, what was it like back then? You know, with the 348 pounds, or even maybe prior to that, you know, what was the state of your health? You know, and what were you eating, you know, back then, you know, 4, 5, 6, 20 years ago? Tell us, you know, a little bit about your backstory.
Sure. You know, I I grew up just outside of Minneapolis and was actually always a really skinny kid. Like in high school, I don't think I got over 135 pounds at 5'8". So you know, that was my childhood, and you know, we ate pretty much the standard American diet. I would say probably more vegetables than most people did, and not as you know, hamburger focused as the rest of the world. But when I got into my 20s, and had a wife that kind of came from an English family of cattle ranchers, you know, we started eating more meat focused and lots of baked goods and things like that. So, you know, in my 20s and 30s, I always struggled with being, say, 20 to 40 pounds overweight, and I'd have to work really hard to take that off. And usually was fairly successful at doing that, but it was a lot of work. And then into my 40s, I'd been in the restaurant business for a good portion of my adult life, whether it was managing a resort in Montana, or you know, working locally at a seafood restaurant as a chef. And then I had taken over a small diner in my town, and we turned it into a barbecue joint. And it was really over that course of time from about age 40 on, where I was gaining like 20 to 25 pounds a year. And I still ate plenty of vegetables, but it was very meat focused. I think the other thing that contributed to the weight gain is in Michigan, we have a ton of microbreweries, and so I would try a couple of different microbrews every week. So, you know, after you know, we were working 80, 90 hours a week in the barbecue restaurant, and after coming home, I would, you know, put down a couple of dark beers. Some people call it a pork chop in a bottle, but you know, really the majority of my calories came from the barbecue meats. We had a weekend breakfast. We did a lot of omelets, and a lot of, believe it or not, brisket hash was super popular. We had a lot of pulled pork and a lot of brisket and a lot of bacon and eggs and that type of thing. So very, very high fat diet. And so it was really over that course of time where I just kept gaining more and more weight, until it just got to be too much. You know, what was going on is I had really severe edema going on in particular in my right leg, and it was so swollen that I could barely put shoes on. If you know what Crocs are, they make a kitchen version of the Croc, and I literally had to cut the top of those Crocs to fit my foot in it because it was just so swollen, and they were oversized in the first place. So
I actually have a picture, that you shared with me. Not everybody knows what that means, edema, or what it looks like. So let me just bring that picture in, just, as we're talking about this, because it's quite extraordinary to see that, if you're not familiar with what that's like. So let me just bring that up for a second. And oops. Look at that. So that's edema. That's like extraordinary. That is just huge.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
You can see the swelling in the foot. You can't even tell that I have an ankle. It's just so swollen. I mean, certainly I was big, but I wasn't that big. I just had no ankle. My toes were obviously puffy. But that edema persisted really in my whole body.
Wow. And what does that feel like when your leg and foot is blown up like that?
The first thing that I can say is that the skin gets real tight. And the other thing is that if you get, if you bump your leg and you get a little cut or something, it just doesn't heal very quickly at all. And, in the kitchen, being a big guy, I always wore shorts just because it was so dang hot in the kitchen, and you get burns on your legs, and those things just didn't want to heal. And you can see part of that in the one picture as well.
Right.
So it's uncomfortable, but it's more annoying and concerning. I would just call it alarming, going, what in the heck is going on? So, I did seek medical help, and over the course of about 2 years, that was from 2014 to 2016, I went to 2 different hospitals, a couple of urgent cares, and a primary care physician. I saw approximately a dozen different doctors to address the issue. They had me on, so on top of the 21 ibuprofen I was taking for, pain and inflammation, for joint pain and inflammation, I was also taking an anti-inflammatory and a painkiller and something else, muscle relaxer as well. So the 3 medications plus all the ibuprofen, and I didn't lie to my doctor and say, oh yeah, I take a little ibuprofen. I told them how much I took, and they didn't seem too concerned about it. They did the deep vein scans, a series of x-rays and things like that. They did an EKG on me, and one doctor got concerned and sent me to U of M hospital. I saw a whole bunch of different doctors there, and that's where they did the deep vein scan, and that's University of Michigan, one of the finest medical systems in the country. And what I'll say about that is that in all of that time, I was proud. We're in a smaller community here. I was proud of my restaurant, so I bragged about it. Everybody that I had the opportunity to talk to about our restaurant to get more business, I did. I'm a talker by nature, and I like to promote it and tell people what we're doing. And
a lot. I mean, people probably who were eating that food, they probably love that food, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So they knew that barbecue was my primary staple, and not one of them suggested that the diet that I was eating or asked me about nutrition, what other types of food I eat or anything like that. They just didn't discuss nutrition with me at all. They didn't recommend that I go see a dietitian. I had one doctor in all of that time, probably a dozen different doctors, suggest, well, you might want to consider bariatric surgery.
I mean, that's just so unbelievable. Here you are. First of all, you're taking all those medications, and we all hear that, like, if you take that kind of ibuprofen on a regular basis, it can cause, stomach issues, and I can't remember what they all are, but I mean, it's not healthy to be on that kind of level of ibuprofen and the weight, and none of these doctors said to you, Jeff, why don't we talk about, losing the weight and helping you get on a program? No one talked about that.
No, I had, my last hospital stay was sort of the straw that broke the camel's back. I I was having some stomach issues, and they couldn't figure out why. They did a full GI scan and said, oh, you know, you might have a little fatty liver, you know, which I figured out, oh, it's just the beer I drank, right? And, you know, they were just going to release me and give me a plethora more of prescriptions. And I thought, oh my God, I'm going to become an addict. So first of all, when the nurses were saying, you know, you're free to go, I'm like, wait a second, you haven't addressed the issues that I'm having here. I've got stomach pain. I still have this severe edema. I want to see the doctor. And they hadn't had an actual doctor that I'm aware of actually in to see me. They ran all sorts of tests and things and didn't see anything. So the doctor came in and he said, well, you know, you should stop living like a 30-year-old man and start living like a 45-year-old man.
And that meaning what exactly?
Who knows? That was his advice to me. And I said, you know, I'm probably just going to be back in here, you know? So I got released and I called my mom and I said, you know, this is what they're telling me.
Before you go there, let me just ask you something. You said you went to all these doctors.
Yeah.
Nobody said anything about diet. We know obesity is a disease, and obesity creates other disease processes. I know you know that now. So, but when you reflect now, back then, why do you believe it is that all those doctors skipped over like the most important lifestyle advice they could give you? What do you believe is the reason for that?
Well, first of all, they weren't lifestyle medicine physicians. And if you're not seeing one now, I'd encourage you to find one. Doctors are taught to treat in a disease model and not from a preventative model. They're not taught nutrition in school. The latest research that I've seen on that is that doctors receive on average of 19.6 hours of nutrition education in all of their medical school. And, you know, that's not the answer to the problems that we have with the obesity and diabetes epidemic that we have in the US.
Right. In fact, my course that I teach, that I created 12 weeks, 2 hours at a time, 24 hours is more than what most doctors get. Right?
Correct.
I'm not a medical person. I'm a PhD sociologist, but oh my gosh, if I could figure it out, it's mind blowing, isn't it? I mean, doesn't it make you angry now when you think about all those people you visited and the money and the time, and nobody gave you that knowledge?
Yeah, it certainly is. Knowing what I know now, compared to them, I was just a restaurant guy, standard American diet. Everyone eats that way, so how could that be the problem, right?
So then, that was like one of my questions. Like, did you ever have an inkling that the food you were, you know, nourishing or actually you weren't nourishing yourself? That's the problem, right? But did you ever have an inkling that on your own that could have been it?
Well, you know, obviously I was morbidly obese and knew that it was what I was eating that was causing that. And, you know, I knew that I didn't have any idea that obesity would contribute to potentially type 2 diabetes. And I was pre-diabetic. Kidney disease, liver disease. I mean, there's all sorts of things that heart disease, obviously, which I think I knew that, you know, the more weight you have on, the greater chance you have of developing heart disease. But I figured, I'm young, you know, eat
right,
what
you're
I
young,
want,
you can take
care
of that later, right?
Yeah.
Wow. So, okay, so let's continue with your story. So you were like, you had this health crisis and you were in the hospital and then, you know, you were going to go on with your story. They released you.
So they released me and I called my mom and I just said, you know, this is what they're telling me. You know, I'm on 3 medications plus all the ibuprofen and they want me taking 8 more. And, you know, one of them were benzos, and I thought or opioids, and I thought I'm going to become a pill addict, and I just didn't want that. So I said, I'm not sure what to do. And my mom got mad, and she said, don't fill those prescriptions. She said, food is medicine. Do the dang research.
Really? And where did that come from for her?
So she had been on this path for a number of years. I want to say at least 12 prior to that, where she was eating, I would call it a primarily vegetarian, maybe pescatarian diet. Some dairy, some fish, some eggs, but no red meat, no processed meat, no chicken, nothing like that. So, I really couldn't go back to work at that point just because I was in so much pain and I was so swollen I could barely, move around. So I did the research and I came across Dr. Andrew Vile's work. I think he's from Tucson, isn't he?
Yeah, I think so. He had the Integrative Center here at the University of Arizona.
Yep.
Andrew Weil.
And,
Not not a fully plant-based doctor,
No.
but calls himself Integrative Health.
Yeah. So I came across his anti-inflammatory diet. And so, I kind of started on that, some fish, some eggs, very little dairy. I stopped eating beef, chicken, and pork altogether. And lo and behold, in 3.5 weeks, that edema, that swelling that I had was gone, completely
Okay,
gone.
that is, we have to emphasize that because that sounds amazing. This horrible condition that you had for, how long did you have the edema, would you say?
2 years.
2 years
Yep.
of that horrible swelling, doctors just giving you medications, not giving you advice that would really make a difference. And you stopped eating most kinds of animal meat,
Mm-hmm.
and your edema goes away.
Yep. That's
That
exactly
is
it.
just astounding. And now, based on what you know now, what do you believe is the connection between eating all that meat and the edema that you suffered? What is that connection?
So there's a couple of things, because the other thing is the dairy. I used to be put cheese on everything and have ice cream every night kind of person, and I stopped doing that. And my cheese intake was very, very little, but dairy is very inflammatory. And then saturated fat, when you're clogging up all of your blood vessels and your capillaries and everything else with fat, there are two things happen. One is that they get clogged, right? And so you don't have the backflow up your arteries. If you don't have enough antioxidants going through your body, you don't have the flow back up from, to your heart and to pump through your body again. So, those excess fluids remain there. And the other thing that happens with that is with intramicellular lipids is you get insulin resistant with all that fat buildup in your cells. It says, hey, I'm full. I don't need any more energy. And it keeps the blood sugar high in the body because it can't absorb it into your cells. So I know that now, but I didn't then. And the interesting thing about after just making that simple change, no beef, chicken, or pork, no more bacon and sausage, right? Because that was something that I ate very, very often, very little dairy. I lost 80 pounds in 100 days.
Wow.
And the edema was gone. My blood sugars went down to normal. My blood pressure normalized. And I was like, holy crap. I guess I'm doing something right. So then I, just because I think because I saw such dramatic results, in just a few months, I continued on the journey because the fact of the matter is I just felt good. I felt better. And it was from being totally miserable to, oh, wow, I feel good. And then I didn't realize how good you could actually feel. So, I just continued on that. So that started at the beginning of October in 2016. And then in February, I think, of 2017, I watched Forks Over Knives and I completely ditched the dairy. And then in March.
Well, hold on a second. So we actually have a similarity between you and me. So when I watched Forks Over Knives, it was in 2012. And I had been a vegetarian for all my adult life, you know, like 30 plus years. And I saw Forks Over Knives, and the very next day is when I gave up my dairy.
Nice.
The very next day. And so just so you could share with people, you know, because I've kind of told my story a little bit many times, but what for you, when you watched Forks Over Knives, what made you want to give up the dairy? Or anything else that you still give up?
I would just say, you know, knowing that it causes tumors and cancer to proliferate was the biggest thing for me. You know, and then the thing that happened after I completely cut out the dairy is in about another 3 weeks, I had really lifelong anxiety, and that anxiety just disappeared. I mean, lifelong, where it was like this gripping every single day, just sort of a, you know, I didn't really know why. I just figured I was a little high strung. But that went away. And, you know, there was this total calm over me. And
was there, excuse me for interrupting again, but I mean, it's just so interesting. Was there, like, here you had this all the time. Can you reflect back and do you like remember it all? Like the day you recognized, wait, I'm not feeling that anymore. Like, did you notice it on a particular day, or was it like, I mean, how did you realize that?
It was just a few weeks later, I just noticed that it wasn't there. And I'm like, I tried to figure out what changed. One of the things that I did on my health journey is I documented everything. You know, when I did the research on, okay, food is medicine, I wrote down all of the essential nutrients that we need in our diet and started figuring out how to get them in food. You know, what has plenty of vitamin C? What has plenty of vitamin A? How does iron work? How does iron transport work? What do I need to increase my iron if I somehow become anemic from not eating enough meat, which isn't the case. It's just vitamin C and leafy greens. And how do I make sure that I stay healthy? Because it was very foreign to me. So I documented nutrients. I documented how much weight I was losing every day, every week, every month. So it was just a matter of writing down, wow, I don't have any anxiety today. And then noticing the next day and the next day and the next day, I just didn't have any anxiety anymore. And I didn't know if it was just life changed or what, but it's the food. As Dr. Michael Clapper says, it's the food. It's always been the food.
Right. I mean, I think that is just so extraordinary, because I can imagine, living with someone high anxiety is not a comfortable feeling. And it probably interferes, with some happiness in life. And to find that something that bothered you for so long is now just gone because you've changed your food.
Yeah, well, and I think that a lot of our mental health issues as well have a lot to do with our diets. You look at places where they say people are happy, and those areas of the world where there are happy people. Ann Arbor, Michigan is one of them, and I'm near there. Colorado and Sweden and some different places like that. A lot of it has to do with their food and their food choices. And I think dairy in particular is really horrific for mental health. And now I know one of the reasons why is because it has something that hits that same receptor in the brain as opioids do. And that's the casomorphins in dairy. And so I believe that has a whole lot to do with just feelings of malaise, feelings of anxiety, feelings of depression. I think depression is rooted partially in diet as well. So yeah, it certainly is the food.
And I'm sure, I know you know this too now, that many people, like if they want to transition, they're always saying, I can't give up my cheese. I can't give up my cheese, right? And so did you have that challenge at all?
I'd say no, not for me personally. I just decided to do it, and it was fine. The other thing that I did at that point was I tried some of those dairy alternatives. I think I used Follow Your Heart brand mozzarella cheese shreds and maybe their Parmesan, or a couple of those things to transition to a whole food plant-based diet. And I don't dissuade people from doing that, but I hope anyone that does do that, whether it's the faux meats or the faux cheeses, I hope that they understand that those aren't health foods by any means. And they're full of saturated fat and oils and things that your body just doesn't thrive on. And there's other alternatives to that, like, as you're well aware, nutritional yeast. I do a plant-based cheese sauce, which I made yesterday, that's made with vegetable broth, potatoes, carrots, onions, a little onion powder, garlic powder, lemon juice, and nutritional yeast. And
Yum. I sounds like something we use too, like for some of our dishes. Yeah. Wow. One of the things I remember that you said a little while ago too is when you used to, when you were eating the other way, you ate a lot of processed meats. I think you said bacon and sausage. And so I guess at that point, had you ever heard that processed meat was a class 1 carcinogen, while you were eating it or not?
Of course, no.
No.
And people don't realize that, bacon and sausage and all that stuff that's full of nitrates, that's going to cause cancer. We know it causes cancer, and there's some real specific mechanisms that trigger colorectal cancer, and that processed meat has a lot to do with that. And people don't realize that. I hadn't known that. If someone said, "Hey, you keep eating that stuff, you're going to have butt cancer," I'd be like, okay, I might think twice about it, but I had no idea. Obviously, I would eat bacon and sausage by the handfuls.
Yeah, I always wonder, because I always share, when I'm teaching, I'm always sharing this, and I don't know how many people, before they're ready, are really hearing that and taking it up. But right, those are dangerous foods to eat. It's so great that you got out of them, and hopefully, if your body maybe had started those processes of cancer, hopefully by the time you started eating more and more antioxidants and all your, plants, that it, squished it back down.
Yeah. So I would think that that's probably the case, just knowing how I feel, and plus I do routine blood work, just because I'm sort of anal about that, and make sure that everything's in check. And my blood work's always very, very good. My vitamin B levels are good. My vitamin D levels are good. So I check on all of that stuff. And that was one of the things that happened to continue on my journey is after watching Forks Over Knives and ditching dairy, I got a little bit of a high cholesterol reading. I think it was 202. And I thought, So my doctor said, and he knew that I had started on a plant-based journey. He's like, well, even vegans need statins. And I said, no. I said, that's, not whole food plant-based people. You don't need statins, unless you've got years and years of issues and familial hypercholesteremia. No. So I.
Do you remember what your LDL was besides the total?
Not right off the top of my head. I want to say that it was like 170.
Okay, well, wow, that's a high LDL.
Yeah, so it was pretty high. And too low on the HDL, right?
Right.
So, now I'm under 150 total, and about a 3-to-1 LDL to HDL, so it's very good now. And so after getting that blood work, I decided to look at my protein sources, because at that point I was still eating fish a couple times a week and eggs almost every day. And so I thought, no, I'll just ditch the eggs. My cholesterol go right down. And he didn't believe me, and it did. Yeah.
And so you
Yeah. And
saw
the other
that,
thing
you
that
gave up
people
the
need to
eggs and you
understand
saw
too,
a big drop?
yeah. Yeah. The other thing that people need to realize is that when you're in fat burning mode and you're losing weight, you dump all of those fat calories into your bloodstream. And so people that are losing weight for a lot of different reasons, it could be that you were sick and didn't eat for 3 days and got a cholesterol test. It could be that you fasted. It could be that that you're just working on losing weight and you've been dropping fat, but all that fat's got to go somewhere and it goes through your bloodstream. So, I've seen a lot of people go, "Oh my God, I'm losing weight, but my cholesterol is really high." I go, "Well, just, if it's really high, you need to get on a statin for now, but it'll go back down." So people
Sorry,
get,
so once they start eating more fiber, soluble fiber, hopefully some of that cholesterol will get absorbed by the soluble fiber and taken out of the body.
right.
I think that's what we're hoping. So I'm curious, you said, like, as you were starting to make the changes, you kind of looked at Andrew Weil's anti-inflammatory diet, but then you went further after you saw Forks Over Knives, and you decided, what, that diet, I need to even push it more. I'm curious, did you find any other, because there's a bunch of different doctors in the whole food plant-based community, and there's some little nuanced differences about kind of how they advocate, people do the eating plan. Did you find any particular one, that you resonated with, or
So
not
yeah,
really?
yeah. So there's this brilliant doctor doing a lecture at I believe a university, and the video's taken at a side view of him, and it's kind of dark, and he's using an overhead projector, and and I'm watching him, and the information that he put out was really quite good. And I'm looking at him going, well, he's got a little bit of a belly. I don't know how healthy he eats and whatever. That actually was Dr. Michael Greger. It was an
He
old
has
video,
belly?
a little bit, yeah,
He always looked like
yeah,
the skinniest guy to me.
yeah. If you watch the recent video that he put out, not super recent, but it's been a few months now, of the lecture that he did on pandemics. He was a little chunky in that video too. And that
I
put out
actually did meet him. I actually interviewed him for about 4 minutes when he
nice.
came to Tucson one time. So,
Yeah.
I've seen him at a couple conferences, but okay, so
Yeah.
go ahead.
So I thought that it was pretty interesting. So I looked him up, and then I found nutritionfacts.org. And after watching a number of those videos, I realized that this is based in science, and the science is all referenced, and I can look it up myself. And I'm a research junkie, and I think that that's probably what saved me, is that I like to research things and find out the truth about them, whatever that might be. If it's something that I'm interested in, whether it's something having to do with nutrition or something having to do with politics. I look up the facts, and I don't just believe whatever is out there in the mainstream, so to speak. So so that was where I found a lot of my information, and I realized that protein is a non-factor in diet. If you're getting enough calories, you get enough protein, and protein is not a food group. When I finally realized that, hey, there's 9 essential amino acids, and your body puts those together in chains to create proteins, it does it on its own. You don't have to have protein or the perfect protein or do protein combined. If you eat a diverse plant-based diet, you don't even have to think about it. And when I found out that the whole wheat pasta that I was eating had as much protein as probably most of the meats that I ever ate, I was like, okay, well, it's a non-issue. So that really changed my thinking. And part of that, I had mentioned that, in my 20s and 30s, I could lose 20 or 40 pounds, but I did a high protein, low carb diet when I did that. And I had to get that thinking out of my head.
Yeah,
And
that's what I was just going to ask you, because that's what I'm thinking about, is like so many people, who do have weight to lose, they're hearing, oh, I'll do keto, right? Because not everybody, there's a bunch of people who promote that, but we know in the long run, that's not healthy. But so that's, I was going to ask you that, like, how was it that you avoided doing keto and you went to, this plant-based anti-inflammatory diet?
Well, for one, the keto is not anti-inflammatory, and anyone that tries to tell you it is, it's a lie. So I had done low carb diets before, not keto in particular, but more along the Atkins style or the Dr. Eads style, high protein diet. And what I know about those just from my own experience is that sure, you can take it off, but you put it right back on as soon as you quit eating that way. So when I was looking at long-term weight loss and long-term sustainability, I wanted to find something that would sustain me, be healthy, and would be a real lifestyle change to make it lasting. I mean, I had 170 pounds to lose, and I did it. And I did that in 20 months, 168 pound total weight loss. So that it wasn't easy to do at the end. The end was a real pain to get those last 20 pounds off. But the fact of the matter is eating this way is sustainable, and it doesn't wreck your arteries, and it doesn't screw up your metabolism, and it's not going. You don't have to make a change that's going to put weight right back on. When you eat whole plant foods, it's sustainable, and you feel good, and you have plenty of antioxidants, and you lower your risk for cancer, and you eliminate your risk for heart disease.
Yes. So you make it sound like, it wasn't that difficult for you. I don't know if that was true. I mean, do you feel like that you were really challenged, or it was more smooth?
So I would say for me personally, it was pretty easy. And the reason being is that I was pretty sick and I needed to make a change. So I did make a change. And then the other thing is I saw dramatic results so quickly that it caused me to stay on the path. But the other reason is that I'm a chef. So I just had to learn to cook other things. That wasn't too hard. So that was part of it for me, is that I made my own recipes. I figured it out. I looked up other plant-based recipes. I eliminated the oils out of my diet for a number of reasons, but the two reasons is it's very calorie dense, for one, and for two, it messes up your omega-3 and omega-6 ratios, and then if you're not eating animal-based foods, it's harder to absorb those omega-3s from things like seaweed and flaxseed and things like that. It's harder for your body to convert them when you're filling yourself full of omega-6, which are also inflammatory oils.
Right.
So and that was a learning curve for me, fortunately, and you showed it in the side by side before and after picture of me. I have a T-shirt on that says PBNSG. That is Plant-Based Nutrition Support Group at pbnsg.org, and they happen to be a Michigan-based nonprofit organization. So I want to say it was end of 2017 when I heard about them, and I got involved with them shortly after, and I got a lot of great education. They bring in the Dr. Gregors of the world. They bring in Dr. Caldwell Esselstyn regularly. So I learned a lot. And as a result of being part of that and hosting a group and being part of some of the other things that they were doing, I realized that nutrition really is my passion. So I'm back in school for a dietetics degree as well.
Oh, how exciting. That's wonderful. So,
Yeah.
one of the things I just wonder, from your vantage point of having been, as you put it, a morbidly obese man with all these health issues, all of us probably know somebody like that. I know people in those situations, and you're always looking and you're wanting to share so much this knowledge, but they're not receptive. And do you think, does it take like a major health crisis? Is that what it is to move somebody in that position? And until that happens, it's like, what do we do? I mean, I'm just wondering what you think about that.
Well, call it a health crisis or a moral crisis. Those are two things that'll move people in that direction, whether it's they realize the torture that animals go through to be on our plate, or the fact that we feed 56 billion human-bred farmed animals crops every year, and a billion humans go hungry every year. And on a humanitarian level, what we do is horrible. And when you start looking at what the effect that has on the environment, so that may be a moral crisis for somebody that causes them to make a change, but it could be a health crisis too. And unfortunately, it does take a health crisis to cause people to make changes. And I wish that wasn't the case. For the people that I know personally that made dramatic changes, one man was lying on a gurney getting ready for open heart surgery. Another man was so sick and so obese and was taking, I forget, 30, I don't know how many units of insulin every single day, and then got MRSA and other things. And somebody else who had so many gut issues that they were in constant pain, and obese, and had no idea what the problem was, and just decided that it was time to change that. Sometimes that's the case, and I wish that there were easier ways to get people to make those changes. Unfortunately, if you're conditioned to think and eat a certain way, a lot of times you just keep on doing it without thinking about it. But if people really think about it, because that's something that I didn't do, I didn't really think about it, and I didn't have someone saying, hey, you might want to cut the processed meats. I didn't have anybody saying that to me. But if and I tell my friends that are meat eaters or omnivores, and I state to them, hey, you know that's carcinogenic, right? You know that causes inflammation. I have a good friend of mine that's a PhD pharmacist, and I have his permission to share this, but I had put him on a little 30-day challenge, and the challenge was, he had been on insulin for 12 years, and I said, this is all I want you to do. He's one of my closest friends in the world. This is all I want you to do. Cut the dairy out of your diet and increase the fiber. I'll take you grocery shopping and let's find some things you can eat. That's all I want you to do. Cut the dairy, increase the fiber. In a week, he was off his insulin.
Oh my gosh. So you're still eating animal bodies though, right?
Yes.
Still eating that, but taking dairy, which is so concentrated and saturated fat, right? And then all that salt that's in there as well, that's, not good, that's in the dairy. Wow.
Yeah. And he had complained about, wanting to lose weight for, I don't know, years. He's like, yeah, I'm 230 pounds. I need to drop 30 pounds for sure. 35 pounds for sure. I need to do that. And it seemed like I heard the same story every year for several years in a row. And I've taken him to the different, Eating You Alive movie and Game Changers and some things like that. So he has all the information that he needs, but in his particular instance, it's a lot of family events and family pressures that he faces. So it makes it really difficult to make those changes. But in that 30 days, he dropped 15 pounds and he got off insulin, but he didn't go back to it because I guess, his health isn't enough of a crisis for him. But,
Jeff, I'm just wondering if during the time when, you were so sick and you had all that weight, if one of those dozens of doctors you saw, or dozen, had said something to you about the food, do you think you would have, taken it in, or would you just have like poo-pooed it? What do you think?
I'm not really sure. Being an arrogant food guy, right? I'm not sure that I would have heeded the advice. But, if someone would have sat me down and said, hey, listen, these are the things that are inflammatory in your diet. These are things that you can change. I probably would have considered it.
Yeah. It's so the other thing I would just, when you were talking a few moments ago, I wanted to ask you. So you were talking a little bit about, well, one reason people might change is from a moral perspective, and you talked, about sustainability and animal compassion. So did you get to the point? I mean, obviously, when you were in that restaurant cooking that meat up, like in that photo we saw, you weren't thinking about, animals and the suffering at that point. Um, did you end up moving to that place for you on a personal level, or is that not really something still that, resonates?
So
How is that for you?
the shirt that I have on says vegan for the
Ah,
animal.
okay. That, because we couldn't see that before. We were saying, so that's the answer. So how did that happen for you? I mean, that's another part of this whole thing.
I think it is. There's, I call it cognitive dissonance, right? You're disconnected from your food source and you don't really realize what goes on. But when you are part of the plant-based world, there are plenty of people that are just ethical vegans, and they don't want to be around other people that eat meat, and they gravitate toward the plant-based groups. So as a result, you're going to get the overflow. Excuse me. You're going to get the overflow of information and videos that are shared, whether it has to do with animal rights or animal cruelty, environmental impact. You're going to be exposed to more of that when you've broadened your horizons a little bit. So for me personally, there was a point in my life that I did go vegetarian for a short time. But it's really difficult to do when you're in the food business. When you're running a restaurant and it's your job to work on menus and work on, how does it taste? Is it any good? Pretty difficult in the traditional space. So I think that just being exposed to that, I figured that I mean, that's part of it, just general exposure. But I think the other thing that happens, and I think this is related to stresses and emotional disorders and things that happen in a human, is that if you think about those animals when they're going to slaughter, they are dumping all of those stress hormones into their bodies. Before that, they're scared, right? All of that fight and flight response and all the hormonal process that happens gets dumped into their muscles, and their immediate response is wanting to run, and that acid builds up in their muscles and things like that. If you're eating animal products, you're eating that. And that, if you don't think that affects you somehow, you're wrong, because it does. So I think that by
And it doesn't matter, does it, if the meat is organic in this sense, right? Because some people are like, oh, I'll eat my free range beef and my, whatever. That doesn't help.
As some people say, there's no such thing as humane slaughter. They're scared and they know it's going to happen. When that hammer's swinging toward their head, or they're getting hung upside down to get their throats slit. Just not a good thing. So the answer is yes, I consider myself an ethical vegan for a number of reasons. For the animals, for certain, for like the things I mentioned before, the impact on the environment, but also the impact that meat eating has on the rest of the world. And that is that the conversion from crops, take 100 calories of crops and put it through an animal, it ends up to be 17 to 30 calories in the form of meat and milk. That's an inefficient use of resources, and people are going hungry around the world, and they don't have to. We have 7 billion humans on the planet, and we have enough crops to feed probably 14 billion. But people are going hungry. And here in the US right now, if you look at the land mass that we use to feed animals versus the land mass that we use to feed humans, it's way bigger to feed the animals than to feed the humans. And yet food insecurity currently, these numbers are fresh today, 1 in 10 Americans, 1 in 10 don't have enough food right now.
Yeah, that
35,
is
35 million
serious.
Americans with the current pandemic and economic situation. And we could switch our diet and change that just like that. But, people want to eat like a king and, feed the paupers the scraps. So.
Yeah, well, you lay it out so well. There's just so many reasons why eating this way is so wonderful for ourselves, for the world, for the animals, right? There's just so many great reasons, and it's so great that you found that in your journey. So let's talk some about, yeah, I mean, here you are, an accomplished chef, and so how to cook, right? So like, what do you cook for yourself? Like, take us through a day of eating and I recognize every day might be somewhat different, but people, like, sometimes they just can't imagine, like, they're just thinking all they're eating is salad and kale all day, and that does not sound appetizing to a lot of people when they're still eating an animal and processed food diet. I know my diet is not just salad and kale, and I would imagine that you have some other things. So tell us, take us through a day of eating.
Well, people generally eat about 4 meats, right? Beef, chicken, fish, and pigs. And there's over 20,000 edible plant foods. So 4 meats or 20,000 plant foods. There's a ton of variety in my daily diet. I'm not afraid of carbs. I don't worry about carbohydrates, and I'm pretty active, but I eat over 300 grams of carbs every day. And people are like, "Oh my God, I get so fat." No, actually, that's not the way it works.
Well, you're also talking about complex carbs, right? Rather than just
yes. We're not talking about pizza crust. Although I do eat pizza about once a month. But yes, I do a ton of whole grains. For breakfast, it's either a smoothie or it's oatmeal with berries, or I do like a kashi goleen, which is a real high fiber. If I'm in a hurry, I'll do that with some fruit and some flax milk or something like that.
So I'm just going to stop you just to get a little more specific. So like, what's in Jeff's smoothie? How do you create it?
So my favorites are spinach and blueberries. I always add turmeric because it's anti-inflammatory.
And then with a little black pepper?
Always with a little black pepper.
Okay.
Because it increases the bioavailability by like 3,000%. So, so yes, with a dash of black pepper. So usually it's berry, spinach, banana, and broccoli sprouts. I do grow my own broccoli sprouts. And so those are, I get my greens and I get tons of antioxidants and fruit. And if I need it to be a little heartier and last me a little longer, you can always throw beans or grains in it, whether it's farro or quinoa or barley or something like that. So that's something that you can do, but that's something that I regularly cook up to, like if I'm making oatmeal for myself, I'll throw a pot on and make quinoa. And so then the quinoa I throw in a jar and I use it, over the next several days to put on top of a salad or that type of thing. So
what form of oats do you typically use?
I use the basic Quaker.
So like a rolled oat.
A rolled oat, yeah. It's
Okay.
not a quick one, not the
right.
5-minute oats, but yeah. So it's a rolled whole grain. So, and then so that's kind of a typical breakfast for me. Sometimes it'll be a bagel with peanut butter. I mean, I happen to love bagels, and I have a great recipe for them. So they get made in my house and they go in the freezer. And so if I want to
so these are whole grain bagels, I assume, right? Like, what kind of flour are you using?
I'm not the baker, so I'll have to get back to you on, because I don't do the baking. So either my significant other or my mom will do the baking on those. So that's not my project. I don't know. So then for lunch, it kind of depends on the day, but I do try and eat uh, a hearty meal at lunchtime. So it might be a pasta dish. I love chili. I've got a great chili recipe. Faro is my favorite whole grain. So I have like a Tuscan Faro and bean dish that I make.
So I don't think a lot of people actually have even tasted Faro. And I'm going to admit to you that we just bought our first bag of Faro this week. I've been wanting to, try that. I'm trying to not eat rice very much anymore because of the arsenic issue and like really buying many more grains. So tell us, I mean, because a lot of people have no idea what Faro tastes like. So is there a way you could kind of describe it a little bit?
So it's similar to barley, but it's a little bit chewier, heartier, and it has a little bit of a nutty flavor to it.
Mm.
It's my favorite. I mean, honestly, and I will send you a recipe that's a Mediterranean style farro bean tomato fresh basil dish
Oh,
that,
yum.
that is super hearty. That's one of my favorites. Another favorite for me is I do a lentil, potato, spinach curry. And I usually put that over rice, but it doesn't have to be over rice because it's got the potato in it. But I'm all about double starches.
Right. And when you make curry, I'm just curious, are you using like a curry powder or using a bunch of other spices to kind of make a curry powder?
Well, curry powder is a bunch of different spices. You can make your own, but I find there's a organic one, and I can't even think of the name of it off the top of my head. That's in like every grocery store practically. You can find it at Walmart for that matter. Um, and it's just curry powder. It's just a basic curry powder, but it has 6 or 7 different spices in it, and most of those off-the-shelf ones aren't super spicy. But if you wanted to give it a little kick, you can add red pepper flakes or cayenne pepper to it. So the potato curry is my personal favorite. My second favorite would be I have a 3-bean chili that I make that it's made with cherries, which a lot of
Mm.
people are like, you put fruit in your chili? I'm like, tomatoes are fruit, right? So it's that is a favorite for me, and everybody that's tried that recipe just thinks it's pretty awesome. It was a brisket chili in my restaurant, and I changed
Ah,
it to a 3-bean cherry chili at after that. So I did convert some of my recipes. I still use barbecue sauce, but it doesn't go on pulled pork; it goes on jackfruit. Uh,
uh-huh.
so I have a lot of those recipes on my blog as well.
Oh, good. Because I kept thinking to myself, isn't Jeff going to do a book, a cookbook? I mean, he'd be the perfect guy. So I don't know if you're heading in that direction at some point. I mean, you're in school now. I'm sure that's taken a lot of time up, but is that anywhere on the
I
horizon, or are you just going to
I've
kind of do it
thought
on the
about
blog?
I've thought about doing my own cookbook. For now, I've got the recipes on my blog, and that's at arespectfullife.com. But I have contributed to the plant-based nutrition support group's cookbook. It's called Perfectly Plant-Based, and you can find that at pbnsg.org. And I have about 6 recipes in there, and there's over 20 whole food plant-based chefs that are part of that cookbook. So it's a great cookbook.
Oh, wait. So say again, how would somebody access that?
So it's called Perfectly Plant-Based, and it's at pbnsg.org.
Okay, that sounds like a great resource to share with people. One thing I'm also just curious about, I mean, having been in a body, that was massively obese, and now you're so completely different. What is it like to be in this body as opposed to then?
Well, the difference is that I can walk around a grocery store without having to sit down at all. I can get on a bike and do something that I love, and that's mountain bike. I kayak, and I absolutely love that. And I wasn't able to do that when I was heavy. So there's just kind of the basics of and when you're wearing 3X clothing, it can be difficult to find large enough shirts that aren't like real basic and stuff that look halfway okay on you. So, just shopping for clothes is like, I can get them anywhere.
I'm thinking as you're saying that, some people who are very into the meat-based diet, and I know some people like that, and they think, oh my God, if I gave up my meat, life would be so restrictive. It would be so, sad and awful. But they don't think about, especially, somebody who's got all that weight on them. I don't think they often realize what their life could be in a different body, as you just described it.
Right. You had said, is it restrictive? And the answer to that is it really isn't. It's not restrictive. People generally eat the same 20 to 25 meals over and over again, whether it's you've got your favorite fast food restaurant and that's where you get your burgers, and it's this burger joint and that steakhouse and this pizza place, and you do spaghetti every couple weeks and you do mac and cheese every week or so. People have the same meals that they cycle through. So to make a positive change, you just need to start slowly replacing those meals with meals that you absolutely love. And that's the thing about like, oh, what am I going to cook today? Well, anything that I make is going to be awesome. It's going to taste good, and it's something that I love. It's not like, oh, I'm going to eat that again. It's never like that. Um, so back to what you were asking before about what is a day of eating like for me. So lunch I try and do real hearty, and then it's almost always soup and salad for dinner. I happen to love salads, and I think there's a lot of variety that can come along with that. I'm a
Give us
spinach.
an idea of what a salad would be like for you, like the kinds of ingredients in there.
So I almost always do spinach in it. So spinach and often romaine. I almost always do some type of a sprout in it. And I often will add, it depends on, so I go for variety, and it depends on what I've eaten the rest of the day. And so if I feel like I need to have something a little more hearty in it, or if the soup that I'm eating happens to be real light, I might throw a few slivered almonds on it or walnuts. I almost always have onions on it. I like peas on my salad. I have a pretty wide variety of oil-free dressings that I use, and I also um, really love flavored vinegars, which a lot of people don't think about for a salad. But flavored vinegars, you can buy a 4-pack through Amazon for $15 and have 4 different dressings right there. Uh, and so the flavored vinegars for me are kind of fun, and I try and make them complement what I'm eating. And then, it's really a big, huge variety of soups. There's so many soups out there, whether it's, something with like a Faro Swiss chard is one that I love to do that's got tomato and fennel and other things in it. Um, or it's a split pea, or it's a mushroom barley, or something like that. So really wide variety. And the other thing that I do when I cook soups is I make them in large batches. If you're going to put a pan on the stove, it might as well be a bigger one or a big one, a stock pot, a 5-quart plus stock pot. And instead of doing a portion or 2 portions of soup, make 8. You're cutting up vegetables, add a little more to cut up. So that's typically what I do with
And then
almost,
you're freezing it, I assume?
and then I freeze it in
And
portions.
so this actually, you probably, have a wealth of knowledge about this. I mean, do you feel like that most of the things that we might make plant-based in larger quantities, that most of these things would freeze well? Because I don't know that everybody knows that. Are there any pointers on that?
Yeah, any soup, and here's the thing, any soup that you have when you eat out in most restaurants, unless they make it fresh every day and that's their soup du jour, all of those soups come from frozen.
Oh.
And so yes, all soups are okay to freeze. There's really very little in the plant-based world that you can't freeze. Now, of course, you're not going to want to eat a salad and try and thaw it out and eat it later. But that stuff is available fresh all the time, so that's not really a concern. But yeah, any of those soups and stews and things like that, you can do. And the other thing that I encourage people to try to eat often And again, the arsenic in rice is a concern, so you really should stick with a rice that has very little arsenic in it and just naturally absorbs it, as we know. But brown basmati from California is good. So stir fries are great, and you can choose to put that on some other type of a noodle, whether it be a rice noodle or a grain like farro. You could choose to do it that way instead, but I do a lot of stir fries. So what's in the fridge? What do I need to use up? Cut it up, throw it in, throw a little low sodium tamari in there. I might add a thickener if I feel like thickening it, or making it with a teriyaki sauce or something like that. But I do a lot of stir fries, and that happens to be something that I love to do. So stir fries,
And
soups,
do you eat soy products?
I do, yeah. No, I don't. There's no issue with soy products. There's no estrogens in it that you need to worry about and things like that. So yes, I eat plenty of soy. I like the Soya extra firm brand tofu. You can cut it up in chunks. You can marinate it and slow bake it. You can, roll it in
Right,
cornstarch.
it's such a shame, you probably know that there is like a line of thinking among some people that soy is dangerous and men are afraid their breasts are going to grow. And I mean, you kind of addressed that quickly saying, those plant estrogens are not going to do that. Our doctors tell us that soy, unless you have an allergy, is very healthy and actually protects against hormonal cancer. So,
right, soy is a bean, right? It's a soybean, and
right.
they're plentiful here in Michigan. We grow a ton of soybeans. Unfortunately, most of them are fed to animals. But yes, it has a good amino acid or protein profile. So does quinoa, by the way. Very, very high protein food, if people want to think about it in terms of a food group or a food category. It's not. Then
And what about like snacks and desserts? I mean, so much of our world here in America, people are always looking for their desserts. What is that for you? That snacks and that.
So there's a couple of things, and this is I think everyone's different in this regard. There are healthy desserts out there. There's black bean no bake brownies that you can find recipes for from like Ann Arbor Vegan Kitchen or she's got some date balls and things like that that are really good. For me personally, there's my three go-tos for sweets are peanut butter, happens to be something that I love. So a spoonful of chunky peanut butter go a long way for me. I do some dark chocolate. It's in moderation. It's good for you. And then I have a great little machine. If you don't know about it, you need to get one. It's called a Yonanas, like bananas, but Y-O on the beginning, Yonanas. And you take frozen fruit and you put it through the machine, and it makes a very creamy. You can do it like a sorbet, or you can do it more creamy by adding a banana to it. A pure fruit dessert. So I do that usually when it's warmer out. Right now it's a little chilly here in Michigan.
Well, that sounds like we make with our Vitamix blender, kind of powerful blender, the nice cream, non-dairy ice cream.
So
And it's like, I can't believe, we'll just throw in some bananas and some cacao powder with a little soy milk, and it looks like soft serve chocolate ice cream, and it actually tastes like that to me.
Yep. So I think the Yonanas is a little cooler in the way that it produces it. Just my personal preference. It's a little more firm when it comes out versus the real creamy that you get in a Vitamix. So so that's about it for desserts for me. Once in a while I'll splurge if it's as long as it's vegan. We have an Indian restaurant nearby that has a vegan carrot cake that's to die for, but I know it's not good for me. So it's a rare treat, maybe a once a year type thing, but you know.
And so what about more fruit? Like you did talk about, you might have some fruit in the morning, smoothie, or with your oatmeal. Are there other points of the day that you like to incorporate fruit?
Yeah,
Whole
sometimes
fruit?
as a snack, I'll eat an apple. I'm an apple lover, and here in Michigan we have a large variety of apples. So I eat apples. I would say probably 4 times a week at least. When I was younger, believe it or not, in my 20s and 30s, I did the apple a day.
Uh-huh. Well,
So,
and it probably helped you with all that other stuff you were eating, right? At least you're getting those good antioxidants and some fiber and other nutrients in
yep.
your apple. So I'm also curious, Jeff, somebody who, because you're an experienced chef, and you did so much animal-based cooking and now you're doing plant-based cooking, do you find any benefits to cooking whole food plant-based as opposed to what you used to do? I mean, just from a cooking angle, or, how does that work for you?
So I would say yes. I think that, you can't really batch cook steaks, pretty hard to do, or hamburgers. People like to prefer to have those fresh, but you can batch cook most plant-based foods. So you can make them in large quantities, and it actually makes for less cooking overall during the week. It might take a couple extra hours on a Sunday or a Tuesday or something like that to make that up. But for the rest of the week, your time has gone down. And I used to come home every day after work and fire up the grill. And by the time you do that and season whatever you're going to put on there and put it on there and cook it, and your other things, whether it's a baked potato or some rice, or butter fry some asparagus or something like that. And that was pretty much every day for me. So I find that it takes a lot less time because I do it in batches, and so I can take it out of the freezer and throw it in the pan on low, and it'll be ready in 20 minutes, and I don't have to think about it or worry about it.
So the time. What about just in terms of things like grease? Do you probably notice something with that?
Yeah. A buddy of mine and he was a patron of my restaurant as well. Posted something about bacon that he got, and I posted the meme that says, "So you wouldn't put that into your drain, but you'll eat that stuff, huh? Because it clogs the drain, right?" And his wife said, "Yep, you're absolutely right. She's been trying to get him to eat healthier." And he saw what happened with me. I think I've got a little bit of.
Yeah, I was just gonna say you're kind of ghosting in the Zoom.
Yeah, so
Everybody. Oh, now you back.
Well,
I don't know what happened.
it's
Oh,
because
there he is, like Casper.
the sun is coming through the window at just the right angle in the sky.
Oh,
So we'll just turn it a little bit so it's not hitting
okay.
the camera directly. So yeah, you don't have to deal with the grease and that sort of messy cleanup and clogged drains and things like that. But it's also not clogging your arteries. So that's the upside.
And yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think cooking that way is a lot messier overall, just because of the grease and the oil and things like that. So it's pretty easy.
And I'm also wondering, when you talked about like how you have to fire up the grill, you did that every day. And I'm also thinking about those cooking compounds that are created when people barbecue or grill the meat on those high temperatures, the heterocyclic amines or the other ones. You've probably learned about that, and it's different with plant-based to a pretty significant degree.
Well, certainly it is. You're not cooking things at super high temperatures and oxidizing everything. So, you got to know that's better for you. Oxidized oils is probably one of the worst things you could put in your body, and yet, people do all this fried food, and I'm just like, oh my gosh. And here's an interesting thing. I do personally know 2 vegans that had to have, one of them had 5 stents and the other had open heart surgery. But I'll tell you this, they were junk food vegans is what I call them. And they ate a lot of fried foods and things like that. So yeah, whole food, plant-based. big difference between eating whole plant foods and eating vegan junk food, because Oreos, potato chips, and Twizzlers are vegan, most of them anyway, and they're not good for you.
Right. And as you said, even like the transitional meats and cheeses, while Beyond Burger, does have health benefits over an animal burger, it still has quite a bit of saturated fat. And, and a bunch of those cheeses are made with coconut oil, which is very saturated. So, I agree with you on that. Those are, you don't want to stay with those foods. Maybe if it's helping you, you move in the right direction, but at some point you want to just engage with the whole foods, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So, I know that you got so excited about, your major transformation and, everything you learned, and then you wanted to start inspiring people. So just tell us a little bit more about, how you've been engaged, with that work with other people.
So I have gone on podcasts and broadcasts like yours, just to hopefully inspire a few. But I also have a blog that I'd mentioned earlier at arespectfullife.com. And so I put the recipes out, but I also, have gotten very interested in the nutrition portion. So there's a number of articles that talk about nutrition, and some that talk about environmental impact and things like that. So there's a number of articles on my blog that deal specifically with nutrition, whether it's reversing or managing type 2 diabetes. I do all of the scientific research, and in my articles, all of that information is there as well. So, someone wants to know why plant-based diets work for reversing diabetes and know that there's science out there on that, there is, and there's lots of it. So it's all referenced, and so people can find that information very easily on my blog. And then, via the blog, I've got links to my social media. So on Instagram, I do try and post various plant-based foods and just show people what I eat every day and how easy it is to eat that way. A lot of times I'll have the different things that I'm cooking on the stove, and I'll shoot a picture of it and upload it to the Instagram stories, which goes to Facebook stories too. And then I run a couple of groups on Facebook. Plants Heal Humans is one, and that's all pretty much testimonials of people that had life-changing and health-changing things happen by switching to a plant-based diet. Lots and lots of stories there from all over the world.
So are you finding those people, or are they finding it and sharing their stories?
Both, there's a couple of places where I subscribe to information, and I'll see those stories and I share them. But I do that just to inspire people and to let people know that it's possible for everybody at any age, at any stage of life, to make that change to a plant-based diet. And here's what can happen, and here's the health benefits that you'll see from that. I also run a group called Weight Loss Tips for Vegans, and sometimes that's more active than others. But I try and put some good practical tips on there for people to be able to lose weight. Because just because you eat a vegan diet doesn't necessarily mean that you'll lose weight. There are plenty of fat vegans.
Right.
So there's some practical science and some practical tips on there as well. So I do that. I do some coaching. I have people literally reach out to me from all over the world. I had one client who was a British citizen living in Dubai that I did coaching via Skype with her, and so and I just try and help people make some adjustments and if they need help cooking and they need help, some people need some real hand holding, and okay, what do I buy? What can I do to make this healthier? What, it might be as simple as cooking tips, or it might be like real comprehensive. Hey, take your laptop and show me what your pantry looks like. Let's clean it out. So it's a little bit of everything. You know, most people are looking to lose weight and just be healthier overall, and some people have more serious issues like irritable bowel syndrome or type 2 diabetes, and so I help them with that to get off their medications and to adjust their gut microbiome so they're not in pain all the time.
That's just so wonderful. And I just want to emphasize, you made a comment about you can do this at any age. And, you know, I know that you must be familiar with the position paper of the Academy of Dietetics and Nutritionists that says that actually, that a plant-based diet is safe for anyone at any age of the life cycle. Pregnancy, baby, toddler, you know, adolescent, middle-aged, and older people, right? Any of us can do this at any time.
Well, the caveat on all of those is a well-planned
Right.
vegan or vegetarian diet. And so I think it does take some planning. People need to understand that you need omega-3s, not from fish oil, but from flaxseed and chia seeds and things like that. That you need to be mindful of iodine intake, that we probably don't get enough iodine in our diet in general. That you know, we used to fortify our breads with vitamin B6, and for some reason they stopped doing that. And interestingly, in countries that still do fortify with niacin in their countries, they fared better with COVID. Surprise, surprise, you know, healthy B vitamins. So there's some things that I think people need to be mindful of, you know, whether it's their sodium intake or their iodine intake. Vitamin D, I think, is particularly important. You need to get plenty of sunshine. But if you're not living in Tucson, Arizona, and you live where it's dark half the year up here, you know, you should be taking a supplement. And,
you know, I have to tell you, even living in Tucson now, I actually am from Chicago, but I've been living here for about 8 years. And, you know, I would try to get my vitamin D outside. But when I took a blood test, my levels still weren't very high. So I am supplementing with D as well, besides, you know, the sun being out here. But one thing I wanted to, you know, just mention is, like, of course, you know, we all want to make sure we get our nutrients. But it's kind of interesting to me. Sometimes when I read articles, you know, about going to a whole food plant-based diet, you know, and they always do talk about well-planned. Well, you know, many of them do say well-planned, but it's like nobody ever says that about the standard American diet. I don't think I've ever read an article which says, make sure you eat a well-planned standard American diet, right? People aren't really thinking about the nutrients that they're taking in there.
Right. Well, and it's kind of funny too, because people will switch their children to a vegan diet, and prior they were feeding their kids chicken nuggets and no one batted an eye at the nutrient content of their meals. And now all of a sudden everyone's freaking out because, oh my God, they're feeding their kids a vegan diet, when it's a lot healthier, and
I know
the nutrients
it's like,
that they get in.
Yeah, it's like so amazing with that. Or it's like, oh no, they're going to take a B12 supplement. Something's wrong, you know? And what a lot of people who are still eating an animal-based diet don't realize, that now the health recommendations are even for people 50 and over who eat an omnivore diet, that they should take a B12 supplement, just because our bodies don't process the B12 as well as we're older. So, you know, that you might have been getting.
Another interesting thing on that, people say, well, you know, you got to get your vitamin B12 from animal products, and they don't realize that, first of all, 99% of our meat supply in the United States is from factory farms. It's not organic, free range stuff. Those animals would have gotten their B12 from grazing and from soil bacteria, because they don't graze and they're fed in troughs, and the grains are gone through a silo and cleaned and everything else. So there's not other bacteria and pathogens in it, to keep those animals alive, because that's money for them if those animals die. Those animals don't get B12, and they all have to be supplemented. And you can look it up yourself and see that the that farms are the biggest buyer of vitamin B12. It's farms,
Isn't that
because they're putting
amazing?
it to the animals that then people are eating. So the whole argument is silly. Oh, you're not getting vitamin B12. Well, it used to be that we drink water from a stream, and we'd get it from the minerals in the water. But being that people can get giardia and things like that, we put everything through a water processing plant and clean it with fluoride and bacteria and chlorine, fluoride and chlorine, in order to take out the pathogens. But it also takes out that soil bacteria and the B12. And all of our produce is washed and cleaned with chlorinated water. And so, no, you're not going to get B12 in your diet. So yes, take a B12 supplement a couple times a week. It's not a big deal, folks.
Right, it's not a big deal at all. I'm curious about your the dietetic program that you've enrolled in, because I've heard stories occasionally that many of these programs are still very animal based, and they even get money from the industries and to create the curriculum. So what are you finding with that?
It takes everything in me to not have to argue on every single one of my classes, but I don't. I choose not to, because I do understand where they're coming from, and they're coming from really a standard American diet, and they're coming from US RDA recommendations, because that's what they have to teach. There's nothing about plant-based diets, and dairy is a big part of the curriculum, and it's a lot of that's been pushed up, obviously, by the National Dairy Council, including in our dietary guidelines. Canada took dairy off of their recommendations, and the USDA still has it on there. So there's nothing essential in milk. Doesn't give you strong bones. It probably gives you weaker bones based on the studies that we've seen now. And you can get your vitamin D from the sunshine, and calcium comes in the form of leafy greens and is a much healthier source in green vegetables. So,
I'd just like to ask you, just interrupt for a second, because a lot of people are always talking about the calcium issue. And, this study came out in the last couple of months about, some vegans having lower calcium amounts and more fractures. And we found out it's because they're just not taking in even enough calcium from the plants. But when you would, if you were to talk to, somebody, what would you emphasize for their, best calcium sources to help them, allay that fear that they might not get enough if they get rid of dairy?
So what I would recommend for people, first of all, is to just Google calcium in food and see what foods are high in calcium. We know that you can get that in dairy and sardines, but leafy greens and kale and broccoli and almonds and you name it has got calcium in it. So it's just not as much of a nutrient of concern. The whole drink your milk for the calcium was propaganda, and it's just not proper information. And the bone fracture information that you're putting out, there's probably co-founding factors, pretty hard to actually determine based on the study data that they're talking about, because they're using food frequency questionnaires and using old data versus what's currently going on. So what they did is they took a baseline of people, and 10 or 20 years later said, all right, how many of these have bone fractures? So in that time, is their diet the same as what they assessed via food frequency questionnaires 20 years ago as it is today? Probably not. Probably changed over those years for some of them. So, there's a lot of things. There's some other nutrients that they're concerned about that might come to play in that, and that might not necessarily be the case. But if you want to look at bone density and bone density scans, people that switch to whole plant foods have better bone density than those who have the standard American diet with a lot of dairy in it. And that data is readily available. There's when you're looking at hip fractures and countries with more hip fractures, the countries with higher dairy don't have lower hip fractures, when you look at population data. So it's just not, it's not going to prevent you from bone fracture and osteoporosis by just getting your vitamin D and calcium from dairy. Just not the case.
Yeah,
So,
there's a great report that I saw by Walter Willett of Harvard on milk and bones. And basically he went through all that, and he's got, some great charts showing the countries consuming the most dairy, and you see the hip fractures going up compared to the lower dairy consumers.
right.
So yeah, we just need to stop worrying, right?
Yep, exactly. You eat a diverse diet, take your vitamin B12 a couple times a week, take vitamin D if you don't get enough sunshine, which is almost everybody living above the 35th parallel. And there is a lot of research, by the way, and I'll bring this up real quick just because we're in the COVID pandemic. The recommendation by a lot of different people, including Dr. Greger, is 2,000 international units daily for your vitamin D supplement. And because for most people, that 2,000 IU daily is not going to get you above 50. That's the marker that they use is, you want to get it above 50 to not, and they say 30, under 30 is deficient, but you want to get it above 50. And in order to do that, you've got to be taking 4,000 to 5,000 units a day. And there's plenty of data based on population and patients as well that show that people who are vitamin D deficient don't do well with COVID. And it could be a factor in why African Americans suffered worse with COVID and why our elderly population, especially the shut-ins in nursing homes that don't get any sunshine, did very poorly with COVID, with outcomes of being deaf. In many of those cases, people with darker pigmentation in their skin don't absorb vitamin D from the sunshine as efficiently as somebody that has light skin. So, if you're African American or older and you need to not make sure you're not vitamin D deficient, and to get over that 50 mark, you've got to be taking 4,000 to 5,000 international units daily, and it's not toxic at that levels. There's no way. They've done long-term studies of 20,000 units a day for years on people that had no vitamin D toxicity. So people don't need to be concerned that they're going to get toxified by too much vitamin D. And I know that McDougall worries about that, and he has one paper that he references, and I've looked at the paper, and just not in order for vitamin D to be toxic, usually what happens is that it is misdosed, where somebody read the dosing wrong and put it in, whether it be a fortified food or something else. And we're talking about hundreds of thousands of units that somebody was given. That's when it becomes toxic, not at 4,000 and 5,000 units.
Right. Yeah. And I've actually seen some recommendations. Actually, I think Dr. Milton Mills, I just saw something where he was recommending for COVID prevention, or if you did have it, 4,000 of the IUs. And I should just say, I know somebody who's actually a whole food plant-based former doctor who's around 65 or around that age, and he just contracted COVID here in Tucson, and his wife, but they hardly experienced, terrible. They had, he had said a couple of days where he had some bad pain at night and whatever, but and then it went away. And I can't help but think he's a whole food plant-based eater, giving himself the best possible immunity with all those plants that he's eating, and the phytochemicals, the antioxidants, everything about it. And I was just so glad to see that his dealing with COVID was not very intense at all. And it's got to make a difference.
So certainly if you've got a lot of antioxidants in your diet, you're going to have a better immune system. And if you're not morbidly obese and you're not eating junk food and things like that, certainly it's going to help. But it's certain, as you just showed, somebody that you know that's a whole food plant-based eater got COVID. It won't prevent you from getting it, but the outcomes might be better. And unfortunately, it's the long-term data that scares the crap out of me. You know, the long-term effects, whether it's heart problems or neurological problems and different things like that. The COVID long haulers, they call them, that make me just want to stay away from that. And I do know the lead dietitian at a local hospital system, who's the head of dietetics, and a whole food plant-based eater, got COVID and had about 5 weeks of hell. So even though she came out of it on the other end just fine, it was rough for her. It was like a horrible flu for sure. But it was 5 weeks. So they think that a lot of it has to do with inoculation or viral load, the amount of virus that you take in to how it affects you. And that's why even if masks aren't 100%, even if they block out some of that, you're better off.
Right, absolutely, of course. So Jeff, this has been just so interesting to me to hear your story. I can tell that you're a man with a wealth of knowledge, and it's wonderful that you're out there sharing it, and now you're in school and you're going to get the license so you can even help people in a more professional capacity. It'll be exciting to hear what you're going to be doing when you finish. So before we end, because I think we've covered a lot, but I would just like to, before we officially end, just give you a chance if there's anything else that you would like to share that I maybe didn't think of asking you that you think would be, valuable for other people. But if you felt, we covered all that, that's great too. And also just some, maybe closing words. Again, we're trying to help other people recognize all the benefits and the value, of being a plant-based eater. And you certainly know what they are from your personal story. So I just want to give you a few moments, to share some closing words, or if I've missed something.
So eat your greens, beans, berries, nuts, and seeds every day, right? Limited on the nuts because they can cause some vascular damage in larger quantities. But those are things that we need to focus on. And even eating a standard American diet, those are things we need to focus on. The two things that people need to get rid of, and I've done talks in our senior centers and different organizations around my community, and I say, if you don't do anything else, at least ditch the dairy and give up processed meats, because those cause cancer and tons of inflammation. Those are the two best things that someone can do for their health. And the other one for inflammation, if people are here because of the inflammation factor, turmeric is a great tool to have in your tool belt. Turmeric with a dash of pepper. I like to do, I call them turmeric shots. I put about an ounce of lemon juice and an ounce of lime juice for me, for my size, I can do about a teaspoon reasonably of turmeric with a dash of black pepper. I stir it up and I shoot it like a tequila shot, because I don't like the flavor of it very much, but it is anti-inflammatory and it'll help. And if I am finding that, my knees are sore or my back is sore and I feel like there might be a little inflammation going on, I still do that, and it does help. So, even though I've lost a ton of weight, almost, a whole person worth 168 pounds was my total weight loss, I still get, so my knees are pretty shot, and if I overdo it, I find that I get some pain and things like that. But I'm not taking ibuprofen, I take turmeric instead.
Well, I just got to tell you, it was another wonderful service that's out there, and you probably know about it. It's called Plant-Based Telehealth. I'm big on promoting them because I think it's the greatest thing. It's a group of doctors that are plant-based, and they have licenses now, I think, in almost all the states of the United States, or they're very close. You can do a telephone consult with them. But what else they have there on their website, they have all this free information. They do free webinars, free Q&As, and I was with viewer questions, and I was listening to one recently, and one of the doctors, Dr. Miller, was talking about the study where they actually compared turmeric supplement with ibuprofen for people with joint pain from arthritis. And what they found was the turmeric worked just as well as the ibuprofen. So why wouldn't you go to turmeric, right? It's not going to hopefully give you those other problems that a drug like ibuprofen will, you know, because there's a lot of issues with that. So, you know, turmeric is great. Some people might want to actually buy a supplement, you know, like that's standardized. I think usually they say the extract 95% because it's the purest amount. And it gives you actually a lot more than the teaspoon of turmeric. I've been doing a teaspoon of turmeric for a long time, just like in a little shot glass. And I just finally bought my own turmeric supplement because I actually have some knee inflammation from a little problem I had. And I want to see, you know, if I could get rid of it quicker. So it was a good thing talking about the turmeric.
Yeah. So other than that, you know, like I mentioned before, find the replacement meals, the 25 meals that you absolutely love, and you know, it'll be a lot easier. Somebody, and I can't think of who, I was trying to think of this earlier, came out with, oh yeah, I know who it was, but it's not public yet. But it's 5 ingredient plant-based meals. It'll be a cookbook coming out soon. But that, if you can find things that are easy to make that you really love, you know, it's like my curry. It's garlic, onion, red lentils, potato, spinach, onions, carrots, and 3 tablespoons of curry powder. It's so easy to make. You literally throw it in a pan and let it cook for half an hour, and it's done.
You know, I wanted to ask you earlier, have you been doing any Instant Pot cooking, or are you just doing it still on the stove?
So I have an Instant Pot, and it sits in a cabinet in my garage and never comes out. I have some Instant Pot recipes on my blog. Part of the reason that I did that is that I was doing some cooking demos for my local farmers market, part of a little healthy eating thing program that we had put together for the local community. And because during our winter farmers market, because the Instant Pot was such a big Christmas hit that year, I decided to do a series with that, and I think we did a 5-week Instant Pot series with that. So there's some recipes like a mushroom barley and a Cajun style vegetable stew and how to do perfect rice and things like that that are on my blog. But generally speaking, I like to see my food cook. That's probably me. It's you know, years of standing over a stove in a restaurant, I think, that I enjoy that. So I don't use the Instant Pot primarily for that reason. And
then smelling it as it's cooking, right? And like stirring and like, ooh, that's looking good.
Yeah, I enjoy that. I mean, I enjoy cooking. So, and in the Instant Pot, it's just doing his thing, and I can't watch it. You know what I mean? So.
Right. So. Okay. Well, this has just been wonderful, and I want to thank you so much for taking the time to share. And I hope anybody listening to you, you know, will feel inspiration. And I'll put your contact information in the description box for the video on our YouTube channel page, so people will know how to find you and go look at your blog, and perhaps, you know, if somebody's looking for a coach, so they can find you. And I think you probably did your closing words, but I just want to double check before we stop.
No, I'm good. Thank you. It was so nice to get to do this face to face with you, even though we're in the midst of a global pandemic. And thanks for having me on.
Sure. Well, my pleasure. And for anybody who's been listening, I hope you'll also just look at what else the content we have on Happy Vegan Couple. Go look at some of our cooking videos, and maybe you'll want to listen to some of the other transition stories we've done. Also on our Facebook page, I post educational content on a lot of things plant-based. So if you're on Facebook, you could check out Happy Vegan Couple as well. And I hope that you'll subscribe to Happy Vegan Couple if you haven't yet, and tell your friends, because we're always trying to share our content with everybody. So I'm going to tell everybody until next time when I see you again. I'm Denise of the Happy Vegan Couple, and I hope, and I know Jeff feels this too, that you will go plant-based. Bye-bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.